Hello everyone. I wanted to take a moment to educate you on the proper use for the North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning and Development that you will use for your activity plans in this course. So here we have an example of a page that lists the domain. It's in the taller category or taller font. And underneath it, it has the subdomain, and then underneath that is listed a goal that you would want children to be showing underneath the subdomain. Underneath each goal that is listed under each subdomain under each domain, you will notice the developmental indicators. And those developmental indicators are listed under age ranges for children, infants through older preschoolers. Notice that there is no specific age range for each of these developmental indicators under infants, young toddlers, young preschoolers, and older preschoolers. The developmental indicator provides more specific information about what the children should know or be able to do during this particular age of their development. However, notice that even though it is listed as specific information for that particular age range child, it is not a checklist or an assessment tool and how it should be used. It is strictly listed as a developmental indicator of what you may see during these age ranges. In the Foundations book, you will notice, as I've already previously discussed, the developmental indicators are broken up by age ranges, infants through older preschoolers. However, if you'll notice here, this little blurb, it talks about how the developmental indicators are divided into overlapping age levels as shown below. So if you'll look here, infants birth to 12 months, younger toddlers 8 to 24 months. So you've got 4 months here where there's an overlap in an infant and a young toddler. And that again is because the development of children varies, and you may have an 8-month-old who's walking and doing more things that are categorized under a developmental indicator of a young toddler, and then you may have an infant who's 12 months who is still definitely in the infant developmental indicators. So pay attention to that as you're looking through your developmental indicators, that it really is age specific and individually appropriateness that we're looking for here. Also, I'd like to point out the goals and the developmental indicators, how they should be used and how they should not be used. This is very important when you're using the foundations. The foundations should promote development of the whole child, including all of the domains of development. Learning characteristics, if you'll just notice that here, that's really kind of that approaches to play and learning. How do they approach play and learning? Are they quiet? Are they active? Are they curious? Or are they really energized and excited? So that's what they mean by learning characteristics. Provide a common set of expectations for children's development. It promotes a shared responsibility for all of us in the early childhood field in North Carolina. We all know infants through age 5 or infants through older preschoolers should be using these developmental indicators, these goals, these subdomains, and these domains for ensuring that children's development is on track as they leave childcare environments at the preschool age. It emphasizes the importance of play as instructional strategy that promotes early learning in early childhood programs. It supports safe, clean, caring, and effective learning environments. It supports appropriate teaching practices and provides a guide, only a guide, for gauging children's progress. It encourages family values and community involvement in promoting children's success, and it reflects and values diversity across the entire state of North Carolina. However, please note that these goals and developmental indicators should not be used as a standalone isolation form of what we believe children's development and quality early education programs should look like. It should not serve as an assessment checklist or evaluation tool in making decisions about children's entry into program. This is not an assessment tool. This is strictly to guide you in children's development, and as you're planning for activities in the classroom, this will help you use those. It should not be used to limit children's experiences or exclude them from learning opportunities. It should not set up conflicting expectations or requirements. It should never decide that a child has failed in any way, and it should not emphasize child outcomes over program requirements. So, as we are getting into a specific area, as you're going through your activity plan, you may be asked to indicate which domain, which subdomain, and which goal is being targeted by a particular activity. This could be one of those easy cheat sheets for the approaches to play and learning category. Again, using the abbreviation, you would write the goal as APL 1, and then that would indicate to your instructor that you understand that it is the approaches to play and learning domain, which falls under curiosity, information seeking, and eagerness, and is goal number 1. Children show curiosity and express interest in the world around them. So if you were writing, again, as part of your activity plan, APL 6, then again, your instructor would know that it's the approaches to play and learning domain, and it falls under the risk-taking, problem-solving, and flexibility subdomain, and the goal itself is children use a variety of strategies to solve problems. So that's just an easy way to write this information on your activity plan if you're being asked to choose domain, subdomain, and goals. Here is an easy access for the emotional and social domain, as well as the health and physical development domain, and the language development and communication domain. But in your foundations book, the current book, which I believe is in reprint right now, there's a mistake under this page in your foundations book. In this easy access page, you will notice that under the foundations for reading, it skips goal 9 and 10. So you would need to refer to page 92 in your foundations book to get to those particular goals in this area. So just make sure that you're aware of that is missing currently in the current edition of the foundations book. And then last, you've got your cognitive development domain. If by chance you are asked to write down the developmental indicator so that you are actually classifying the specific developmental indicators for the aged children that you are working on. Here is where you would write, or how you would write, the specific developmental indicator. Notice here we've got ESD 5A. So we know that ESD is emotional and social development domain. And then we know that ESD actually falls under ESD Goal 5 falls under the category of developing a sense of self with others. That would be on previous pages, because actually Goal 3, 4, and 5 fall under the developing a sense of self with others. So you're going to write ESD 5A as the developmental indicator if you've got a young toddler showing this specific developmental indicator that you must list on your activity plan. So that's, again, if you're asked to list the developmental indicators, that's how you would write the developmental indicator. Sometimes you're asked to also list the strategies for infants and toddlers. But if you're not necessarily asked to list a strategy, what these strategies can actually help you with is your activity planning, because it's going to actually give you some suggestions. Model gentle touches for toddlers as they interact with others. So that's a modeling activity that you would use with children. To promote attachment, allow only a small number of people to care for each child. That's not a part of your activity plan, but this is a strategy that is pretty important for young children. They really don't need to have a number of caregivers rotating in and out of the classroom constantly. So these strategies can be as part of what the child care center does as a whole, or what a specific teacher can do for a particular child to support them in a particular subdomain under a domain of development. What I didn't necessarily say is that after each of the subdomains, and after all the goals that are in that subdomain, that's where you will see the actual strategies for infants and toddlers, and then strategies for preschoolers. So sometimes the area for strategies for preschoolers give you more suggestions, and this one is a hard category where the domain for emotional and social development doesn't always give specific strategies or activities that could be used, but in some of the other domains you might actually see a specific strategy or an activity that might be used, say under the cognitive development domain for math or science activities. That information might be there in the strategies for infants and toddlers, and then strategies for preschoolers. So pay attention when you're looking through the Foundations book to see if you can find specific strategies that might actually give you a suggestion for an activity to use with children. Okay, so now that you have learned a little bit more about the Foundations document, I wanted to go over the actual activity plan for the capstone project for this course. You notice that you will submit a draft version of the activity plan, and that version is due in week 8 of the course. Once you have submitted that draft, I will provide feedback and return it to you within a 2-week time frame, because I do have 37 students. It will take a little time to get that information back to you. And then you will have until week 12 to submit the final version. The final version needs to include the recommendations that I provide for you in the draft, you need to make those updates on your final version. So when you submit the final version to me, I should see a vast improvement over what was submitted in the draft. But hopefully you'll submit a draft that's almost perfect, and then you won't have much to do in the way of editing your final version. So the one thing that you will notice is that it will be a different format for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. So there are 3 different formats, and that depends on the age group that you're working with during your work experience. One thing that I would like to point out upon the instructions that we need to discuss, and these particular items are listed in each of the format versions. So they're very similar in the format versions of what you need to provide. Notice you need to include a name of activity, materials, procedures, resource, where you found the information. I need to have documented proof that you know how to find professional resources to plan for activity plans. So the particular ones where students kind of struggle, and I want to provide additional information up front. And again, notice this is the same information here that you would need to have in the preschool format. Try to list all that together, and then in the younger infant plan also the exact same. So when you are actually looking at how you will ensure a healthy and safe environment for the child, respect for the child, and support for the child is happening during this particular activity, you need to address how you will create a safe, healthy environment that all children feel nurtured, respected, while supporting challenging developmental needs. So, in the infant plan, this is going to be child specific because you are planning activities for 2 children. Because in an infant room, the children's development, it's very individually based. So for you, it will be very child specific when you are addressing how is the environment going to be safe, how are you going to make sure the child is healthy, how are you going to nurture and respect the child, what if they don't want to participate, and how are you going to challenge or support them during that particular activity. For toddlers and preschoolers, for this one you need to think, if you're planning for an entire group, this is where you need to address that you might have some children who are below the activity level that you've planned or are bored by the activity that you've planned. So how would you challenge those particular children, or how would you support the child who is not who is challenged because it's way over their head and they don't understand? Or how would you then challenge the child who's bored because it's so easy? How would you then challenge that above his skill level? So be sure that you're addressing that information. Be sure that if you have any children with disabilities that are on an age range, depending upon the disability, that you are supporting those children as well. How would you support those particular children? Here's another area where students often get confused. What content concepts are addressed in this activity? This is where you go back to your instructions and you will find the concepts. These are the content concepts for infants. Again, only infants. These 5 categories. But if you're working with toddlers or preschoolers, they're the same. Notice here the concept would be language and literacy if you are planning an activity in the book center. and or in the writing center. Language and literacy, it's in the writing center. So that's your particular, and they're working on writing skills. In the arts, in the dramatic play or in the art area, what particular concepts are being addressed here? So this information is where you will find when you are looking at what content concepts are being addressed in this academic discipline. List the foundations. Here is where you will list the domains, subdomains, and goals. That information has just been reviewed for you under the foundations training. And then parent participation. These are strategies that families can do at home with children. This may be found in the foundations book under the strategies at the end of each subdomain after all of the goals, or but just make sure that it's specific to this particular activity. Don't just make up a particular strategy that all parents will take home this activity. Be realistic, be intentional about the activity. This is only done for one activity. So in the preschool activity plan or in the toddler activity plan, you've got 3 particular days. So for the outdoor play, you're only doing a parent participation strategy for one of the outdoor play environments. You're only doing it for one of the open-ended art activity. For the infants, you're going to do it after you're doing actually 2 activities for each child under each domain. So you need to list a strategy for one of those strategies or activities that the children are doing. So again, refer to your foundations book as a way to get families to participate in this activity at the home environment, so that you're transferring what they're learning in school and using it again at home. So it really supports families as well as the children in the environment, because they're getting repetitive information. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Remember too that you need to include where you're actually getting these activities from. When you find something that you would use, you need to cite your resource in APA format. Notice that if you are under the home page under course resources to assist with writing, there are APA quick guides, and I'm not sure that you know this, but let me pull up Microsoft Word here. And if you're using a newer version, even if you're using the 2013 version of Microsoft or 2010 version of Microsoft Word, if you look under references, you can insert a citation. You can choose your APA style, and it kind of, all you got to do is type in the information and click OK, and it will do it for you. So it will put it in the right format. So this information should not be, I should not have to cite students for that they've gotten this wrong. So make sure that you're using the information that you need to use in order to cite it correctly. Hope again this has been helpful for you. If you have questions, please ask ahead of time. I would like to assist you in any way possible so that the drafts aren't that difficult to grade for me. And one last thing, your draft needs to be complete. If you turn in half of the activity plan as your draft, that's not acceptable. It needs to be fully complete in order for me to have full and accurate feedback for you. I cannot grade it and give you the feedback that you need if you turn in half of an activity plan. So make sure that whatever you submit in week 8 is a full version, and it's a draft, but it's complete all the way through.